All right, so quick follow-up from project. I was grading like 6 to 8 hours on Sunday. A couple things that I'm going to mention is I feel like every one of you probably could have read this description 2 or 3 or 4 more times carefully. This first one was graded purely on correctness. I was not picky about style. And many of you just did not like necessarily, like I told you like, hey, these are 10 points. They were basic, or these were 5 points each. And then you didn't print the output as was described. So read those carefully. The auto grader revealed a lot of what didn't read, because if you would have just done exactly as the grades was marked, I would have passed the auto grader. So what I did is I actually went through and manually graded a lot of them for correctness after that. So carefully read the project descriptions. If you have a question on what something means, feel free to reach out. A little bit of my own story. When I'm doing a class, I will have found that I spend 5 hours where if I would have just read the project description, I could have done it and I would have answered my question in 5 minutes. So I would just basically like type something, hit run. Didn't work. Do it out for 5 hours. But if I would have just read again, it would have been solved so much quicker. So that's my big recommendation. If you're not sure how to handle a certain case, it's probably in the description, but if you still don't catch it, please feel free to reach out. A lot of things, it helps me understand if I'm grading for partial credit, which I will on the projects, is to remove debugging statements, because I'm not sure what you're printing. Many of you who left debugging statements in there, I just saw a string of like 20 numbers and I'm like, I don't know what any of these numbers mean. Like you didn't actually say, hey, like if you're gonna log something, go ahead and say like, be a little bit more explicit. Do something like print X is, and then put X. Like I have like, there's a string of 20 numbers to me is like, I don't know what any of that is. So that will be helpful should you not have something logically correct in the future and I'm checking it for partial credit. The other thing that would also help you all should something not be logically correct is use descriptive variable names. I saw a few scenarios where someone's variable names, not calling anyone out, was A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, something like that. I'm like, I know the Phoenician alphabet. Well, at least up through P. You have the ability to use descriptive variable names. Like, for example, if you are talking about the number of quarters, go ahead and do something like num of quarters or something like that. That will help if I'm ever checking for partial credit, that I know like, hey, that's the number of quarters. So don't just do the alphabet. And if you find yourself using a lot of variables, this is again something we'll learn as we go forward. You're probably considering a scenario where iteration might be a better scenario because there's less to track. These are things you pick up as you practice more. So it's definitely a skill that does take some development. The other thing that would also help me from a grading standpoint that I did not have up here, as we get longer programs, use comments and doc strings. Use words to describe what you're trying to do, then I can more easily help you should we ever have office hours and sit down, or if I log in to help you over the weekend. Like if you have some comments or doc strings that I could read to just kind of see your thought process, that does really help, especially as we get into longer code. Another thing that I saw that I would make a recommendation from stylistically, Python, you're allowed to use spaces. I think I saw one program that was literally just 100 lines, no spaces, no comments, very hard to follow. Remember that you have the ability to use spaces to go ahead and separate logical chunks. That was just something that I think is something to get the hang of. And for now, I mostly just graded on correctness. Like a lot of these things, I didn't really like harp on I didn't take anything off for proper or non-descriptive variable names. I didn't take anything off if you did just write 100 lines of code. But these are things that will really help you as someone writing the program and someone who it'll also help me as someone who reads the program and tries to help you out to just follow some of these basic conventions. And we'll talk a little bit about more style here today as we talk about like the history of Python, maybe just a few words on that. But does anyone have any questions? Oh, last thing I should say, I was talking, if you showed up a little late, I was fighting with my fire to get the rubrics up like for 2-3 hours yesterday. I eventually said, forget it. So Anna was my experiment, and I was like, she's usually here early. So Anna confirmed that you can see the rubrics if I post them a certain way. I'll go ahead and transfer the rubrics over for the rest of you all. My goal is by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. I have homework I have to finish up tonight. So, yay. I think I'm done. I'm just checking it for the 5th time, aka rereading the project description. So, any questions on anything related to the project? Yeah, Alejandro.
Going for the difficulty levels, so the hard should be like using like bisection search, right? How should like the difficulty? What's easy? What's medium? What's
Sure.
hard?
So this is a question relating to the project that's due this week. Let me go ahead and just pull up the project. Okay, so you're asking about basically parts 2, parts 3 and 4. So this is one of those things that it was kind of interesting. Basically, part 3 is using kind of a naive guessing scheme, because it's really like it's one of those things like, look at this example. We're counting by so we're counting here by 10,000s. We're always too low. But then when we get too high, we start counting back down by 1,000s. So it would be better to go ahead and try and subdivide. So like instead of going like here we're at 60,000, here we're at 70,000. You know what? If we're now too high, let's go back down to 65,000. Let's try to use a bisection search. That would be better. So that would be hard in terms for you as the generator, because the computer is going to be smarter at guessing using a bisection search. And this is like a modified linear search where you're basically just iterating. A full linear search would be ridiculous, because a linear search would just say, I'm going to start counting by 1. I'm going to be like, okay, you have a number in your head. I'm going to be like 1, no, 2, no, 3, no, 4, no. I mean, that's medium. I mean, they'll eventually guess it. It's better than random. But a bisection search is something that, honestly, a computer, again, we'll talk about this as we get into asymptotic complexity later in the semester. Binary search runs in log base 2 running time. So it'll be able to find it within like log of n guesses, where n is basically the problem size, which is how many numbers you have. So interestingly, though, this modified linear search actually did better. So medium mode, the computer did better, but that was also a fact that we didn't have to guess by 1s at all either. So does that answer your question, Alejandro?
Yeah.
So medium is medium for you. Oh wait, it's medium difficulty for you because the computer's not being super smart. But in hard is the computer's being smart using a bisection search. So that's why it's hard for you as a generator. Any other questions concerning the project? Definitely take your time, read through this. If you have questions, I have set aside Wednesday to help you guys out on any of the exercises as well as the project 2. Okay. So with that being said, let's go ahead and actually learn about something new today. It's, again, not going to be as bad as recursion was last time. It's not going to stretch your brain as hard. It's more about learning just some syntactic things to get us ready for the next project, which we'll need to have a little bit more experience concerning strings. So go ahead and get yourself set up with I'm going to just work in main.py, but go ahead and get yourself set up with just something you can kind of code along and experiment with. Once you're ready, just kind of say, hey, I'm ready. Such energy. Woo, there you go. Thanks, Patrick. All right, so today we're just going to talk a little bit more about strings, some things that we haven't talked about them yet. We're going to talk about how to transverse them. We're going to talk about how to look through them. We're going to talk about how to slice them, dice them, and chop them all up. There's something in Python known as string slicing, so we're going to learn about slicing. So strings, by the way, is a string is a sequence of characters. So again, there isn't so much of a distinction in Python, but if you were to just look at the letter C, just hello, that's the letter C, that is a character. But if you were to spell a word here like charming, like my personality, okay, that is a string, because in a string is made up of a sequence of characters. Again, a sequence is ordered, so if you hear me say a string, technically I'm talking about a sequence of characters, and if I just say a character, I'm talking about a single symbol, letter. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about indexing. So the first thing we want to talk about is indexing. So the index, let's define what that is, of a string, I'll just say it this way. The string is a location in a string. By the way, Python strings are 0 indexed, which means the first character is at index 0. So let's go ahead and define a variable called fruit, and I'm going to go ahead and put into that the string banana. Banana, just because it's a fun word, banana. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and get a letter again, or you can put a char. So I'm going to just do a char. I think in the notes I called it letter, but now that I'm teaching it. So in the notes you'll see letter, but I'm going to use char just to emphasize that this is a character. And let's go ahead and look at the letter that is, and this is the indexing notation right here. So you're going to put some variable, or you don't even have to put a variable. Like I literally could have also just did I'll show that in a sec. So, and let's go ahead and print the char. Let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. You can see it printed the A.
That's so cool.
And again, don't think that this is not the first letter in the string. This is the letter at position or index 1. If you actually want the first one, you would have to go ahead and index at 0. So you can see that's what printed the B. And by the way, this whole notation is fine. You could have also just went ahead and directly printed banana, and next to the string you could go ahead and index at 0, and you can see that would do the same thing. But typically you're storing some string in a variable, and you need to go ahead and get the certain letter of the string that is stored in the variable. So again, I'm going to just go ahead and continue working with the variable. It's easier to type, so that is the ideas of positive indexing. So again, let's go ahead and just do char2. That is fruit, and I'm going to go ahead and do fruit1. And you can see if I did print char2, that's just reassigning another variable, or assigning another variable. So these, of course, were positive indexes. So that's, I guess I'll put this here. So this was positive indexing. We can also consider negative indexing. So if we go ahead, and I'm going to just overwrite char, whatever. I'm just kind of playing with the indexing idea. And I'm going to look at the -1th index of my fruit. And it is going to print also an A. Okay. Let's go ahead and just kind of explore this. If I were to index the -2nd index, it's going to also be A. Oh, you know what? Sorry, that's not right. What did I forget to do? I need to print, So let's try that again. So print, now I need to move down my print statement. So I'm going to run this, which is, again, A. But let's go ahead and now do -2. That is our n. So let's see if we can consider the pattern. Anyone want to take a shot what the letter at the -3rd index would be for, what would that print? Anyone want to take a shot at it? It would indeed be an A. So what's happening is a negative index essentially just goes through the string backwards. I'm sure you guys have maybe run into like Geeks for Geeks is a website that does a lot of tutorials. So this is basically the indexing scheme that Python uses. So the first letter is the 0 index, but if you were to go ahead and consider negative indexes, it just allows you to go ahead and work backwards through the string. So you can see if we were looking at the string Geeks for Geeks, -1 would be S, -2 would be K, and so on. So that's a nice little convention. And just to make sure we're good, what would be the -4th? What would be in the -4th index? And we can confirm that, and indeed is the n. So that is negative indexing. I'm going to go ahead and delete the print statement. And the next big topic we want to talk about is the length function. So the len, or short for length function. So as we go through strings, it would be nice to know the length. So I'm going to go ahead and store that in the variable length, and what I'm going to pass into this function is going to be some variable or some string. Again, the string is just stored in the variable root. And we'll go ahead and print length is length. And again, this is also what I was referring to when it comes to debugging. Don't just print random numbers. Go ahead and help yourself out. As you have more variables, just go ahead and specify some sort of information about it in your print statement. So that is how you grab the length of the string. You do want to be very careful with this because what we're going to start talking about is iteration. But a couple things to be careful of is don't do something like this. Don't do len is equal to length of fruit. And then, of course, I'd have to do this, because if you do that, let's see what happens. It looks okay, but what if I wanted to go ahead and then print lane of, let's say, hello? If you do that and you run, it's going to throw this error. Why? Anyone see what the subtle bug was there? Close. They're not two different functions. So look at what the bug is, or what the message is. Type error int.
So you reassigned it so that it didn't have a function.
Yeah. So be very careful. Don't ever use len as a variable name, because you're basically overwriting the function len with your variable, which is storing an int. And let's be honest, the length function is a really nice one to have. Whew, just left me out of breath. Okay, so so keep that in mind. I always, for some reason, I think it's because I don't always program in Python. I sometimes will try to use len as a variable, and it's fine in a lot of other languages, but not here. Okay, one thing to be careful about is printing. Like, let's say you want to go ahead and figure out like the last letter. So something that I tend to actually do a lot is I will index in right here, and I'll be like, oh, I just need to figure out the last letter. So instead of using a negative index, I'm like, oh, there's 6 letters in banana, so I'm gonna just index into the last one. And if you look at this, we get this index error down here called the string index out of range. Why is that? Be very careful, because the length will tell you how many characters are there, but remember, Python strings are indexed at 0. So if you think about it, the last letter is not at index length, it's at index length -1. So be very careful. If you need to get the last letter, don't go ahead and think the last letter is in the nth position where n is the length. it's in one less because you start counting at 0. So again, let's go ahead and print, and that's just a little subtlety about the, it's just honestly one of those, this is sometimes referred to as an off by 1 error. A lot of bugs happen because you're off by 1. Anyway, so close. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll just comment that out. Let's go ahead and now talk about transversing, or we've been talking about it as iteration, but sometimes you'll also, in the context of strings, you'll hear it called string transversal. Transversal. That's a fun word, making sure I spelled it right. So of course, to transverse along something means to move along it. So this is the idea of iteration. There's a couple ways to do this. It all depends on kind of what you need from it, and we'll run into some different exercises over the next few weeks that kind of show the benefits of different ones. So one way to do this is outside of here, let's do it first. I'll name it. So let's do it with a while. Let's first do it with a while loop. To do it with a while loop, what you'll do is you'll have your starting index right here. And while the index is less than the length of whatever the variable is, or the string, so the one stored in fruit, what we can do is store in the character fruit of whatever index we're at. We could go ahead and print the character. And then, of course, a while loop, you always need something to increment or you need to do something to increment the looping variable. So that would be the index needs to be increased by 1. So honestly, super annoying, because all we wanted to do was print each letter on a different line. So if we run this, okay, banana's going down. It's, bananas hang from trees, so it's hanging from the shell console. Okay, but it really does seem kind of annoying that to just print the letters, it took 5 lines of code. Like, that seems a little excessive. I don't know. So okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just comment this out. Let's go ahead and do it with a for loop. So let's go ahead and do it with a for loop. And what we'll do here is for index in range of length of the fruit. So this is another convention. And what we're going to do here is print fruit at, we're going to print the character at index, or at index as it iterates through. So again, the advantage of this one is we don't have to kind of declare the index in the outer scope. It's again, just for readability, it might be useful to say char is equal to fruit at index, and then go ahead and not print the, not do too much logic in the print statement, but then go ahead and print the char. So we could run this, and you can see it does the exact same thing. Again, I always recommend using a temporary variable. It's just one of those things that's great if you're using a debugger, because it actually extracts that information. And we're not worrying about memory complexity and things like that in this course. We're just trying to get things correct. But I'm not going to lie, this still super annoying, because you have a composite of function here. You are calling the length function and then passing that into the range function. And that's what's doing your loop. By the way, this syntax, like if you ever programming in a language that's not Python or more modern language, like if you ever had to go back and do Java or C or C#, if you ever just find yourself in programming in those language in your future, you're pretty much going to have to go back to one of these two conventions. They don't have a lot of the quote-unquote Pythonic features that we have in this language. I love this language. It has so much syntactic flair that really makes it nice. So there's that one. So what we're going to now do is we're going to do a for loop with the in keyword. And I think I've actually seen a few of you use this construct in your exercises. Again, maybe as you just search the internet for help, you've ran into this. It's pretty standard in Python. So the in keyword allows you essentially to go ahead and access a sequence. And this is also going to be useful when we talk about lists here. probably on Friday, we'll do a little bit about lists, but still leave some time if anyone has questions. Because like I said, Fridays, I don't want to stay to 4, but if you have questions, I'm always hanging out. Okay, so let's do this. What we're going to do with a for loop is we're going to go ahead and basically remove this logic from the body of the loop, and we're going to go ahead and just put it right into the actual the for statement. So what we'll say is for the character in, and now what we'll do is just do fruit. So this Python is smart enough to basically do all of this logic right here using the in keyword. So what we can now do is print the character. And let's go ahead and run, and we still get a banana. So this is something that is really nice, but again, it's not in every language. Now, you'll find, and we'll look at a few examples down here below, that you might still need the index. So you might be like, okay, can we go ahead and, would we have to go ahead and use this? And you could. If you actually needed the index and maybe you are searching for a certain letter, and we're going to look at an example of that down below, you could do that. But there is another construct called using the enumerate function. Before I do that, question, yeah.
So is the char, like C-H-A-R, is that a function as well? We reassigned character to the second letter of banana.
Yeah.
So why does it work?
Okay, so remember that you can reassign variables. So yeah, up here, we did assign this to A, but here we're assigning it again to the different letters. It's now the part of the iterator.
Okay, so it is just a function like characters in the string?
It's not a function right here. This is the, here, let's go ahead and just, let me make sure everything's good. Okay, so let me just prove to look at this. Let's go ahead and look at the debugger and see what happens. Let me get a couple breakpoints to illustrate this. So we have breakpoints where we first define char, and then we have the other one right here at this loop. So I'm going to run this, and notice at this point there is no variable in our stack frame called char. So the next step, notice we now have char equal to b. Again, let's go ahead and step, and I'm going to step down to line 16. So notice here that line 16, we go ahead and access the -4th index. What did we say the -4th one was? -1, -2, -3. It was the n. Yeah, so now we'll step, and notice now char is n. We've overwritten it there. And just to speed things along, I'm going to go down to the, so let me go to the next breakpoint. So again, their char is still n. The next step, it's going to go to be the first character in the string that is stored in fruit. And then the next line is going to print that. So you can see there's the B. But notice when we're back at the top of this, but when this line, when this for line runs, it's going to grab the next character that is in the string stored in fruit.
So I guess more of my question is if you had said assigned it to letter is equal to fruit 1, you couldn't have done. Could you have done for letter in fruit?
Yeah.
Really?
This is, you're basically declaring a variable here. So if I were to do, so this right here is implicitly declaring a variable. So I could say letter, or I can do L, and I can print L. But so if I do it, if I print L here, it doesn't exist in the scope outside, hence this syntax there, or is yelling at us here. But the moment you do this loop, it defines, it basically, it assigns is the word I should be using. Yeah, so it's implicitly creating that variable.
Okay, cool.
But here's the thing. It's only putting it in that scope. So notice here, if I run this, well, wait, actually does it, is it? Okay, yeah, so here's the thing. It does maintain it after that scope. Okay. So you can see it printed this A twice because outside that for loop, it still existed. So it's one of those things. Be very careful with it. because if you store something earlier, like L is equal to 10, and then you iterate through it, it's going, here, just one more just to illustrate, print L. So if you do that, you can see it's going to print 10, but you use that same variable to iterate through, and it doesn't go back to 10 after the for loop is done. It held that last value. Yes. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions on this so far? All right. So let me get rid of this. Just okay. All right. So if we need the index and don't like range of lane of fruit, which I don't, so we can always do this. Use the enumerate function. So you'll find that, like I said, just to kind of where we're going is we're going to need to maybe search for a letter, and we'll have to remember where it's at in the string. So we're going to need to know what letter we're looking at, and we're going to need to know the index. So notice the disadvantage to this construct here on 37 is we don't know what the index is. We're just iterating through the variables. So how do we deal with that? Well, what we can do is we can do this. For I, comma, char, in enumerate fruit. This, by the way, this is considered Pythonic, and I'll talk about what Pythonic means here in a sec. So let's go ahead and just print I, comma, char. Again, this will just do this next to each other, and you can see now, let me just get rid of this too so it doesn't. So you can see that is printing at index 0 is B, at index 1 is A, at index 2 is N, at index 3 is A, and so on. So this right here, I'm just going to say the word now. We'll talk about this more in the next week or two when we talk about tuples. Python has an idea known as tuple unpacking. So basically this enumerate returned a tuple, an XY, but in this case it returned an integer character, and we unpacked them into two separate variables. More on that soon, but it's a really nice thing that's considered Pythonic. By the way, I don't know if anyone's run into this. If I just go, excuse me, okay, if I just go to the console and import this, you'll get this little poem right here. This right here is in here from basically the developers of the Python language that essentially shares with you their philosophy. So if something's referred to Pythonic, this is kind of the philosophy that is guiding that statement. So go ahead and take a second, read that, just because I think it's a fun little bit of Python history. That shows why we construct things and define things a certain way. After you've done that, ask your neighbor what their favorite line was. Ask 2 or 3 of your neighbors. I mean, you're all on that side of the room, ditched me, so that's fine. So yeah, go ahead and read through that and just maybe take 2-3 minutes to discuss that with yourselves. What's your favorite line? I have to pick mine first. All I want is something. Yes. Now that you've read it, or maybe you're finishing it up, go ahead and ask those around you what their favorite line is. All right, I'm curious now. All right, let's go around. Anna, what's your favorite line?
The Dutch one.
Where's that one? I didn't.
Although that way may not be obvious at first glance.
There you go. Andrea?
Probably explicit is better than implicit.
Explicit is better than implicit. For any of those of you who have a boyfriend or girlfriend, maybe one day a spouse, that is great advice for marriage right there. Just tell me what you need. So yeah, don't try to read in between the lines. Things just hey, tell those around you, hey, I need you to do this to help me. So, all right. So let's see, Patrick.
Same one as Anna.
Same one. Seth, the Dutch one. Are you guys Dutch or? Caroline.
There should be one and preferably only one obvious way to do it.
Where is that one? Right above the Dutch. And there should be one and preferably only one obvious way to do it. And it's funny that I just showed you 4 different ways to transverse a string. And the obvious one depends on the problem, and that's now that I've kind of looked at the clock, we'll probably do that more on Friday. But we have one more thing I want to cover after this little exercise. Lois? Same? Yeah. There should be one and preferably only one obvious way to do it. Life would be easy if it was like that, right? Alejandro?
Now is better than never.
Now is better than never. Where's that one?
But then never is often better than right now.
But although never is often better than right now, yeah, it's like the whole your emergency is not my emergency type thing. But anyway, I think that's a fun little bit of Python history that carries through, that hopefully kind of explains why we do certain things, and we'll continue to do it as we talk about exceptions and other constructs. By the way, I don't think we've ever said this. Did anyone look up why we call this language Python? No? I don't think you'll ever guess this. So it's in the official documentation. I'm not making this up. You can go to python.org. Why is it called Python? For Guido van Rossum. Rossum is the initial architect of the language. He was reading the scripts of Monty Python's Flying Circus, which is why he called it this, as nothing really clever is like Pythons or sleek. No, it's literally based off of a British comedy. I would show you some clips, but some of them are inappropriate. So what you do in your own time is up to you. But you might want to do that. It's like Monty Python and the Holy Grail is the most common one, where it's like, I lost my arms. Okay, anyway, something to watch later today. So it's called Python because the initial designer was reading scripts for the British comedy. And by the way, if you don't like British comedy, it is a little weird. I'm not going to lie. My mother-in-law really likes British comedy, so I don't know. Not enough puns for me, Do you have to like it? No, don't worry, but it does help. Okay. So that's a fun little thing to know about Python, its origins, and its philosophy. All right. So let's see. We have 2 more things I want to talk about today. Let's go ahead and, after my big rant about how we're going to slice and dice things, we do need to learn about Python slices before we leave today. So let's go ahead and talk about Python slices. By the way, now that you know, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and define a new variable s for string. By the way, never store a string in a variable called str. Because remember, that is your function to cast to a string. So and by the way, you're actually fine putting it in string, but I'm going to just do s. So s, now that you know, let's go ahead and just do Monty Python. So now you know why this variable will occasionally show up in documentation and tutorials. Monty Python. So, okay, so what we're going to do is I want to go ahead and print, I don't know, let's just do our first example. So is basically another way to go ahead and do the string is to use this indexing notation. But what we're going to do is we're going to basically pass it into a half open interval that we're used to from like domain and range. So we start at 0, and then we go up to 5. And if we go ahead and print first, let's go ahead and see what happens. We get Monty. Oh, actually, I forgot that I did both words. I'll just call this first word. So then that's more indicative of what we're looking at. So first word. I only wanted to print Monty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the string, but I'm going to just slice that with the first, with 0 through 5. And by the way, just to think about like what we're looking at here, this is going to be 0 is less than or equal to the char. No, I'll just say the index. And that is less than 5. So this is a half open interval that we're using to slice. So this will give me the first, or excuse me, the 0th through the 4th index, which is the first 5 letters. So what would be the second word? If you want to go ahead and get the second word, you need to go ahead and slice. What would it be? Look at the index where Python starts. And then remember that, of course, it is not a strict, or it is a strict inequality on the right. So what would be the first character, or what would be the first index, or what index are we at P? Did anyone get?
Do we want the space?
You don't want the space. I just wanted the second word. So that's going to be the 6th index, which would be the 7th character in the string. And then it would go up to what? It would go up to 11 or 12. It would be 12. So it would be 12. Because it's that off by one thing. Like, remember that it is it's equal to on the left, but strict on the right. So let's go ahead and just make sure that we did this right. Print the second word. And let's run. So Monty Python.
I don't understand the 12.
So why the 12? So, okay, hold on, slow down there. I just wanted to zoom in. Sorry, that was a little trippy. Count how many here there. So M is at index 0, O is at index 1, N is at index 3. Excuse me, wow. It's the third letter, but it's at index 2. So let's see. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But remember, if you want this right here is going to be the inequalities. This is 6 is less than or equal to I is less than 12. And then those count by integers, obviously, because it is a sequence we index by an integer. Okay. Just one, let's go ahead and let's say we just want to go ahead and do, it's Monday. Let's say we just want to get the mon, M-O-N. So what we can do, let's just call this day, and we see that as part of our string, and it would be, take a moment, what would it be? 0, 2, 2 or 3? 3, because we want the third letter, but that is going to be the second index. But, let's just confirm we're right. So let's print day. And we run. Okay, good. So it seems obvious to start at the beginning, right? Like when you start things, you start at the beginning. So you don't even need 0. So if you see just nothing right there at the beginning, you assume it's 0.
But we have to put the colon before the 3.
Say again?
We have to put the 2 dots before the 3.
That's if you're not quite. The colon. Yes. Sorry, I was thinking about something that as if you put 2 colons, it means something different. Okay, so slicing is fun, right? So what if you want to put, I don't know, you're just looking around and you're like, I really want the on. Like, I want to get on this. So let's say you are looking for a preposition. Preposition, and you see there is a preposition in Monty Python. You see that there's this on, and then there's this on is a preposition. How would we go ahead and get the one at the end? At the end, how would you get the second one using slicing? Just the ON at the end. How would you do it? So,
Could you go negative?
you could do that one. There's multiple ways to slice and dice this, like you said. So, the one I like to keep things positive, unlike Seth, just kidding, Seth. Negative slicing probably would be easier here because you're at the end, but you have to be careful about order. We could play with that in a sec. But you can do 10 to 12. And if we go ahead and print the preposition, let's go ahead and see if that was right. Preposition, that's a fun word to spell in front of everyone. So print, but just in the same way that you assume you're going to start at 0, if you just like, hey, I want to go, you don't want to worry about it, you just know you need the end. If nothing is there, you can assume it's the end of this, it'll get you to the end. By the way, implicitly, I don't know if you guys caught that, this is actually lane of string. So again, that's a little bit of Python slicing. What if you want the space? What would you do if you wanted the space? Just how would you slice to get this? So you just want one letter. How would you get just the space using Python slicing? Obviously, you could go ahead and do just a single index. So you can do S of 5. But again, if you wanted to use a slice, it's a little bit redundant, but you would just remember as a strict inequality. So again, the space would just be the 5th index, and if you go up to the 6th, be careful here because our temptation is to think, oh, that's 2 letters. But remember, you only have strict on the right-hand side. So print space. One other, okay, this is the 9 notes, so we'll see. Let me check. This might be a disaster. We'll find out. But we have 2 minutes. So what can I do with 2 minutes? Maybe you want every other. In Monty. Okay, okay. So let's say, I think this will work. So you want 0, 2, again, up here. That'll get us Monty, 0 through 5. Of course, I do need to put the string right here. But if you put another colon, you can declare the step. So if I do 2, I think this will work. We'll see. Every other, or every, what am I saying? Yeah, every, why did I pick such long names? Because I said be descriptive. Oh, this is my fault. And Monty. Okay. So now let's print. Yep. So that's just money. That's the money one. So, or MNY. So this is Python slicing is a fantastic tool. We're going to use it in a variety of different things, especially when it comes to slicing up lists as well. My recommendation is, I think, Python slicing exercises. Honestly, yeah, just you can. Oh, this is even. So I would spend a little bit more time playing with them, but those are the basics. But that is a good stopping point after we have sliced up strings. Any questions on anything from the day? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.